So again, welcome all to Envision's webinar. We have not done one in a while, so we appreciate you all being here and, being in our space with us and, having these conversations. So our webinar today is Envision's approach to growing CHW power. So today's agenda will have some Envision updates, a message from our Envision leadership, and then Envision's approach to growing CHW power, not two, and then Q&A, and then we'll do our wrap up. So who is Envision, you might ask? For those that may be new or, we are new to you, Envision is a CHW-led collaboration of expert CHWs and CHW allies who offer support, guidance, technical assistance, and training to organizations and individuals nationwide. And if you would like to learn a bit more about Envision, we have a lot of good stuff. You can visit our website, join our My Envision community, which we will transition to later after the webinar for more discussion. And we have our resource library, which is filled with an abundance of resources that are very valuable. So check them out. All right, without further ado, we will have Lisa Renee Holderby-Fox to give us our leadership message.
Thank you so much, Monique, and good afternoon, everyone. And I also want to thank the full webinar team who graciously gave me a few minutes to speak to you all this afternoon. I know they have a packed agenda today. So, and the Envision Executive Director, on behalf of the full Envision team, I want you to know that we hear you and we're here for uncertainty. Many folks have asked me if I've seen times like the short answer is no. While we've seen cuts to public health in the past, and we've seen CHW programs have cuts in the past, I've never seen anything like this. What I can tell you, though, is unfortunately, I've been exactly where some of you are. I've worked for a program that immediately lost funding rather, and we had cuts, had to shut down immediately. And I know what that can do for morale. I can also assure you that that was not the end of CHW work, nor was it the end of our need in communities for CHWs to do the work. And finally, it was not a reflection of the need communities have for CHWs. We bounced back. We did it then. We're going to do it again. These are uncertain times for many, right? Our workforce and the communities we serve have not been spared. However, there are some things that I am certain about. We are a strong and a resilient workforce, and we will rise. Challenges only make us stronger. And we have allies across the country that believe in us and know our value to communities and public health. I can also assure you that the full Envision team is here to assist you in any way we can. While some of our services may look a little different in the coming months, we are not going anywhere. Please lean on us and each other as we navigate this new reality that we find ourselves in. So as I prepared to speak to you today, I really searched for the words that could best describe this moment in time. And honestly, I didn't think my own words would be quite enough. However, I did find words that I hope will encourage us all and remind us who we are as a workforce. So as I tip out, I want to thank you, and I want to thank Dr. Maya Angelou for putting down on paper the words I was searching for and couldn't find. And so I hope you all don't mind the slight tweaks that I've made to some of her words, and I'm hoping she doesn't mind either. So, CHWs and CHW allies, remember this. Just like the moons and like the suns, with the certainty of tides, just like hope springing high, still will rise. So I'm hoping you all can take that little message and a larger message from the Envision team and move forward. And again, know we're here to support you. Thanks, Monique.
Thank you, Lisa Renee. That was amazing. All the love in the chats, and you see all the stuff on the screens. I don't know if you can see everyone, but a lot of love, and that was an amazing words to share. And I will go back really quick because I did not introduce myself. Oh, I got so excited about the webinar. I did not introduce myself. So I am Monique Allen, and I am the My Envision community coordinator for Envision. So there we go. Now we can move forward. All right. So a little Envision news. Our next webinar is next Thursday, and that'll be Envision's approach to CHW financial sustainability. And save the dates for our other two webinars, May 29th, CHW Leadership Development, and June 26th, CHWs and Healthcare Teams, Strategies for Powerful Collaboration. So we hope to see you there. We will have, like I was speaking of, the My Envision live stream, and that will be after this webinar. So, and this conversation can continue over there, and you can come over, ask any questions, have more conversations and Q&A with our presenters. So hope to see you over there as well. Now we will have an awesome presentation by Essie and Leslie talking about Envision's approach to growing CHW power.
Thank you so much. Hey, we got 106 people here. It's all my friends. Hello. And if I haven't met you, we're going to be friends by the end of this webinar. So, hey, everybody. My name is Essie Bristol. My pronouns are she, hers. I'm a CHW. I'm based out of Papillion, Nebraska, and I am the CHW sustainability lead with Envision. Leslie?
Yeah, thanks, Essie. Hey, all. I'm Leslie Wolf. I use she, her as my pronouns. I am a CHW ally. I'm also a community organizer by trade and heart. And I am Envision's director of programming. I'm based out of Madison, Wisconsin. So good to see our numbers here. So many great folks in the chat and in on screen, and we're going to get into it.
I just want to say thanks again, Lisa Renee, for those words of encouragement. And I love to see what people are writing in the chat. I love Sylvia saying, "Can't no one keep us down." Objectives for today. So we are going to be really helping you all discover how strengthening CHW leadership and allyship is essential for long-term sustainability and systemic change. We'll recognize the importance of relationships and building CHW power and leadership to sustain the workforce. Then we're going to reflect on our own individual and collective relationships and how they contribute to advancing the workforce. And we'll explore a couple of tools to help us identify and prioritize key relationships, strengthen CHW influence, and advance our goals. So let's get into it. First, I have a question for everybody. What is CHW sustainability to you? Would love to have some people put it into the chat. What is it? What is CHW sustainability? I'm going to see what people write down. Financial backing. Networking. What else? What is CHW sustainability? Building self-sufficiency in the community. Jobs that are stable enough to build up CHW leaders. Clear scope of practice, excellent training, thriving wages. Respect and recognition for our work. Absolutely. Okay, y'all, there's a lot of really good stuff coming into the chat. So let's pull up our definition here. CHW sustainability really includes everything that you all have been putting into the chat. It's about leadership development, ongoing funding, workforce development initiatives, career ladders, making sure that there's supportive supervision, quality evaluation of the work that CHWs are doing, and so much more. Ultimately, sustaining the workforce, it's critical for ensuring that CHWs can continue to effectively address community needs and improve health outcomes to advance health equity. So in order to do that, we really need to be able to focus on growing CHW power, which is why you're all here today. That's what we're going to talk about. So next, why is sustainability so challenging? I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but we know the CHW workforce in general, it's vulnerable. We lack resources and support and are oftentimes not leading the policy and program design, which can result in fragmentation and retention issues. Financial sustainability, oof, that's a big one, and we're going to talk about it next week. That is challenging because a lot of times these programs are receiving short-term funding, and there are major limitations for funding, like Medicaid reimbursement, things like that. And also, there are funding opportunities out there, and the recipients of those funding opportunities need to be able to understand how to identify and capitalize on those opportunities. So we're talking about sustainability a lot, but what does that mean for CHWs? Well, we really at Envision emphasize 4 interrelated building blocks, we call them, to CHW workforce sustainability. That being community leadership, policy changes, institutionalization, and securing resources. You'll notice that securing resources, that's one part of it because obtaining continuous revenue for employment is crucial for sustainability, but it is only one aspect, okay? We need to systematically embed or incorporate CHWs into existing institutions, such as health departments, with proper training and guidelines. To ensure long-lasting change, we need to modify or create rules, regulations, and policies. But sustainability isn't just about policy and structural changes. It's about ensuring that those policies and structures in place are equitable, which is why it's so important for community leadership and ownership to prioritize the leadership of CHWs to be the driving force behind CHW workforce sustainability efforts. So that brings us to Envision's approach. Here at Envision, we emphasize 2 foundational strategies for sustaining the CHW workforce: building relationships and aligning local and national efforts. These really leverage the intrinsic nature of what makes CHW work so impactful and what CHWs do, what we do in our day-to-day, and it combines it with organizing principles and other CHW practices to increase CHW power and leadership. This bad boy here is a resource that utilizes the approach we were just talking about. Please, we encourage you to follow along. We are going to drop into the chat the link for the English version and the Spanish version. This is the CHW Participant Guide and Reflections Journal. It's something that we created for the CHW Sustainability Summit that Envision hosted last April. Oh my gosh, it's like exactly a year ago. That's wild. So some folks, this is going to be familiar. Other folks, not so much, but don't worry. We're going to point out some places that you can start to learn and what you can explore within this guidebook. So again, we're going to get into a couple of the tools that we have in here today. Not all of them, but a couple, and help you figure out how to start to get to use them. So please share this resource with anybody who's not here on the call today that you think it would benefit. And I will pass it over to Leslie.
Thanks, Essie. All right, y'all. So we're going to talk about this image on the slide a little bit here. And this is really our approach to capacity building through relationships and aligning efforts. And at the center, right, that triangle in the center is growing CHW power. And power simply put, and I see the request for the definition, right? Power, simply put, is the ability to act or the ability to do stuff, the ability to take action or make things happen. And the key to sustainability is really about strengthening our power, our capacity to direct and guide outcomes. And so when we think about that, right, this really includes like influencing decision makers, or even better, becoming the decision makers ourselves, shaping narratives to reflect our community needs and priorities, and determining resource allocation to ensure community needs are met. And this is, so then around the triangle there, this is really a cycle where you could start anywhere, and it's about starting with what you know. So since CHW work is deeply relational with insights into community concerns and priorities, you might start on the right of the triangle with an inventory of your current relationships and power. And then comes a power analysis, where you might use a power map tool to determine decision maker levers and then directly impact decision makers by developing relationships and aligning interests. And through a combination of data, community stories, and one-to-one meetings, you listen to what people care about and the issues they focus on. And this helps you find where their interests and yours intersect. And this process really builds champions and leaders and coalition around the effort. Power is then demonstrated by that continual relationship, by holding decision makers accountable through follow-ups and reviewing decision making and continuing to foster relationships to stay informed and really know what's coming. And then you evaluate and reflect on the progress made. You analyze the growth and power, because at this point, right, you've been building relationships, you're growing your power, and you continue building relationships to further grow power. And each point on the triangle contributes to the broader CHW movement, really amplifying CHW power and in turn, advancing CHW workforce sustainability. Okay, so I said a lot of things. And we're gonna dig into this a little bit more. So in the next few slides, we'll discuss this in a bit more detail. So change happens through people, narrative, and resources. So then how do we strengthen the ability for CHWs to make change happen? CHWs can directly impact decision makers or people by developing relationships and aligning interests. And then CHWs have a shared story, a narrative of deeply held cultural perspectives that come from shared experiences, values, beliefs, and culture. And we can align that narrative to build public understanding and support so that CHWs can then influence the way resources, like funding, are distributed, especially if people's interests and narratives are aligned. So in short, that star there at the where all of these intersect, right? We make change happen by influencing people, narrative, and resources. And we do this by building relationships. So why do relationships result in change? I've said relationships a lot, right? So what is this about? Why relationships? Why do relationships result in change? Through relationships, we understand what makes people do what they do, what makes them tick, what they care about. And what people care about creates the motivation to make change and make something happen in community. And so in community organizing, it's a concept called self-interest, and it's how leaders make changes in their communities. Self-interest is what motivates an individual to take action, even in altruistic situations. And understanding how our own and each other's self-interest interact with the issues is really central to making change happen and advancing our goals. Because the more people that care about an issue, the more people we have to make change happen. And this is really relational work. So we need to be intentional in creating the head and heart connection and allow space to explore self-interest. So if you make your way to page 16 and 17 of the participant guide and reflection journal that Essie noted, you'll see a self-interest worksheet. And we want to invite everyone, not necessarily right this moment, but we want to invite everyone to take some time, maybe right after the webinar, to review these worksheets and do some reflection on your own self-interest, which is one of the best ways to engage others. And really learn about other people's self-interest. And you do that actually by learning about your own first. So it's doing some of that, self-reflection to do a better job of listening for other people's concerns and hearing that. All right. So when you are in relationship with people, you bring your self-interest and they bring theirs. And relationships build power through shared interests. So when more than one person cares about something, right, this is what we just talked about, there is more attention going to that interest. With every additional person who shares that interest, there's greater energy being given to that interest. The more people care about an issue, the more power you have, because the more opportunity you have to influence decision makers or become the decision makers. And this is really an endless source of power to tap into, and it's one that needs some strategy. So a power map is a great tool for determining relationship building priorities based on whatever goal you have. So I'm going to turn it over to Essie for a power mapping demonstration.
Hello again. Okay, y'all. Some of you have already seen this. I hope it doesn't get boring. I love this demonstration. And for folks who haven't, I know we have some organizers and people who are familiar with power mapping on the call. I hope you enjoy it. This is just one of the many tools that we teach. That is not our tool. We've adapted it to help people understand how they can grow their power. And I'm going to use an example that hits close to home. A power map, though, let me tell you, is really about being able to prioritize and strategize. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about what a power map is and what it does on the next slide. All right. So firstly, I want to explain what is all this, what's this graph that we're seeing? Yes, one that says, I love this tool. Me too. Okay. So this graph here, if you look at it, there's a lot of words. Make sure that you're pulling like the slides right now so you can see everything. So the x-axis, this arrow that goes horizontally, that indicates the level of support that someone has for a specific goal that you have in mind, okay? Now the y-axis, that's the one that goes up and down vertically. This one indicates the level of power that someone has, decision-making power as it relates to your goal and getting it accomplished. Now along both of these axes, we have different indicators as well. Like support goes from die hard against all the way on the left to die hard support all the way on the right. And then for the y-axis, again, we have this person is not on the radar. They don't have any decision-making power all the way at the bottom. Thank you. Yes, we needed that little mouse, Caitlin. I'm doing it on my end, but you can't see. And then at the very top, you can see this person has decisive decision-making power or influence. Okay, so that's first with the axes. Next, you want to look at the quadrants. So we have in the bottom left, this is someone who has low support, low power for your goal. So you want to understand their view and keep a pulse on their strategy. Up above it is someone who has more power, decision-making power, but doesn't support your cause because they're further on the left side. So you want to, again, understand their view and address the impact and build bridges strategically. On the right side, this is the fun spot. The top right are people who have lots of decision-making power and are totally supportive of your goal. So you want to focus on building alliances and co-strategizing with them. And then the bottom, you definitely still want to pay attention to these folks. These are people you can build power with. This is where you can build coalition and build alliances because they really support your goal, even if they might not have all that decision-making power. Okay, let's get into an example. So let's go to the next slide. Perfect. I'm going to give you an example using a goal that I had that was near and dear to my heart. When I was 9, I wanted a dog more than anything, everyone. Okay, I think some people here can relate to that. And if I had a power map, it might have looked something like this. So we have on here, we have Juliana, Danny, Christina, my mom, my dad, and a 4th grade teacher. And we're going to talk about why they're each in the specific spots that they're in. So I have the bottom right, Juliana and Danny. These are 2 of my siblings. Christina's another sibling. They are both my younger siblings, and they both totally agreed that yes, we should totally have a dog. That would be so fun. Full support. But do they have the power to make that decision? No, not so much. Now, if you look over to the left, you can see my older sister, Christina. She has more power. Really, she was able to influence my parents. They listened to her. However, she was inclined against having a dog because she was really busy, had a lot of after school sports, also very allergic. She didn't want to have responsibilities falling to her, and she didn't want to be sneezing all the time. Okay. Then you'll see my dad is in the top right quadrant. This is because he was generally always inclined. Whatever thing that we wanted that would make us happy, he wanted us to have that. So he was inclined toward, but you will notice that he's lower on that power, decision-making power than my mom. And that's because he was a parent who would often say, go ask your mother, which some of you might be able to relate to. So if you look at the top left, my mom is at the highest for decision-making power, and she's also inclined against. Now, this is because she wasn't sure that we'd actually be taking on that responsibility. She was very allergic. She was worried that all of the dog care and keeping was going to fall to her and my dad. The last person on here is my fourth grade teacher, who is at the very lowest quadrant at the bottom. And this is because my teacher had no say in whether my family got to have a dog or not. But she was someone in my life, and she had had a negative experience with a dog as a child, so she believed that no families with young children should have a dog. So she's down there. I didn't completely discount what she thought, but that's not where I'm going to spend my time and energy to try to achieve my goal, is it? So next, you have all these people on your map. You can go to the next slide. You can think about who prioritizing. Who are the main decision makers? That would be my mom and my dad. Where do I need to spend time to achieve my goal? Again, not with the fourth grade teacher, but prioritize moving over my mom and my dad. Christina had influence, but she wasn't someone who got to make a final decision. So that's why I have mom and dad circled. Now, if you go to the next slide, we strategize. Okay, so I put myself on the map because we want to put ourselves on the map, how much power and where we are. Now, this is a lot of arrows and circles and stuff, but I promise it's going to make sense. So I knew that I could influence my dad. He would tuck me into bed every night. So I'm like, okay, I have an opportunity to connect with him and talk with him. So you'll see an arrow going from me to my dad. I could influence him. But I knew I couldn't influence my mom. I just didn't have that kind of relationship with her. But I knew who did. My two younger siblings, Julie and Danny. And so Julie and Danny and I would strategize together. We built an alliance and we said, okay, let's make sure I'm going to talk to dad every night and say why we should get a dog. And you two are going to talk to mom every day and say how much fun it would be to have a dog and how we'll be so responsible and what are some things that she cares about. Us getting outside. We would get outside more, you know? We wouldn't just be playing Zelda, be playing video games on the couch in the summer. We're going to get outside. So appealing to her interest and to my dad, I would say, Dad, this is a great opportunity for me to show you that I really can take care of something and I'll always walk the dog and I'll always brush her and everything. So we took that time to strategically, based on the relationships that we have, influence the people that we knew we would have influence over, right? We did not spend any time talking to my fourth grade teacher and very little time talking to Christina, although she did get more used to the idea as time went on. So if you'll go to the next slide, good news, at the end of this all, my mom and dad actually ended up being able to talk to each other. My dad became an ally. He said to my mom, hey, him being the one who has the most influence really on my mom, hey, you know what? Essie's been talking and I think that this is actually a really good opportunity for us to for her to show us she's responsible and she's ready for this and a dog could be really good. And my mom said, yeah. And Julie and Danny said they'd get outside more. So they started to work together and think this is a better idea and move further along towards that upper right quadrant as we had more one-to-ones, as we had more time to talk to them. And even my sister moved over. So that was a huge success. And you can see that Juliana and Danny and me, we all grew our power because we were able to influence decision makers. So we were further up on that chart. And I got to tell y'all, good news. Next slide. We got a dog. We got a dog, everyone. This was Ginger. She was my best friend. Love her to bits. I think anybody who's had a dog remembers their first dog. Nothing like it. So that's me and Ginger when I was 9. And she had a wonderful life, and I loved having her in it. So, want to thank you all for following me on that journey and how to use how to use a power map and how it can help you to prioritize and strategize towards your goal. Okay, I'm going to pass it over to Leslie.
Thank you, Essie. I love that story. And I think it does such a nice job of illustrating how to use a power map and the power of a power map. So thank you. If you want to advance the slide. All right, so once you have a goal, a great tool for preparing for a power map. So if we were to sort of like go backwards a little bit, right, and do like the pre-work before the power map, a great tool for that is a partnerships table. And in the participant guide and reflection journal on pages 22 to 24 is a version of this partnerships table. And so based on your goal, you brainstorm who's impacted by whether the goal happens or doesn't, who are the decision makers, the ones that can make it happen, and who are the people that can influence whether it happens, and then finally who the opposition is. And once you have them, then you plot them on a power map, like what you saw Essie do, and then strategically plan who to strengthen relationships with to advance the goal, like you saw Essie do, right? And you heard hopefully you heard in Essie's story some of those nuggets of some of the self-interest pieces, right? Like it was they identified what mom and dad cared about, you know, getting outside more, responsibility, and really spoke to that in their relationship building strategy and effort to deepen a connection and bring folks along to care about the same thing they cared about. So let's unpack this a little bit. Thinking about Essie's power mapping example, and I'd love for folks to just interact in the chat here. What did we hear? What was the goal? What was Essie's goal?
To get a dog.
Yeah,
To
to
get a
get a dog.
dog.
Yeah. All right. So really concrete goal, right? It helps when your goal is like really clear. Okay. So Essie's goal, real clear, get a dog. All right. Then who was the decision maker or makers? Yeah. Right. Ultimately, it was like mom, dad, but ultimately mom. Okay. And then who were the key partners or people able to influence the decision maker?
Her siblings.
Yeah. Yeah. The siblings. All right. And who was impacted by this? Who was most impacted by getting a dog?
Everyone.
Yeah,
The
everyone.
family.
Yeah, the family, right? So who wasn't impacted in Essie's story?
The teacher who
Yeah,
had
right
a
on.
fear of dogs.
Yeah. Okay, and then finally, who was the opposition?
The teacher.
The teacher.
Yeah. Well, and who else was sort of opposed in the beginning?
One of the siblings.
The mother.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
And her sister. She had allergies.
Exactly, exactly. Okay. So you see that picture, and then if you want to advance the slide, please. And I know we're taking, you know, a real simple example, but it's to build I always say like this is what really builds the muscles, right? We build those muscles to have this sort of strategic approach across anything we do when we have these types of examples to work through. So, okay, so here you see this would have been like the pre-work, right? Filling out the table. And then if we want to advance the slide, then once again, right, then everybody's plotted. So then plot the partners on the map, assess how much power you have, where you need to grow power. And then finally, the next slide, please. The list of priority partners, right? All the people on the map except the fourth grade teacher, because the map revealed that there would be little to no gain in deepening the relationship, deepening that relationship, right? The relationship with the fourth grade teacher for this particular goal, possibly for a different goal, but for this goal, it wasn't necessary to deepen that relationship. Awesome. Thanks y'all for playing along, for taking apart the example and running with us a little bit. I'm going to turn it over to Essie now so that we can get into an activity.
Thank you. Yes, y'all are on fire. Thank you. Thank you for interacting and answering those questions. We are going to get into an activity where you all can think about how you might be able to use some of these tools in your own life. So what we're going to do is have folks divide for about 20 minutes, and I promise you're going to make a friend in this group, okay? And we're talking about building relationships. Here's a great opportunity. We're going to put you into random small groups where you're going to discuss the following question. Again, for 20 minutes. That's not too long. Introductions, and you're going to want to yap away anyway. How might you use power mapping and or the partnerships table that Leslie just showed you to build CHW power? And what we're going to ask you all to do is to share some key takeaways from your discussion with the large group when you come back. We're going to have time for a share out. So we'd love to hear some examples from you all. This is just first drafts. We're just starting to think about it. No idea has to be totally fleshed out or anything like that. Or you can say, I know exactly what I'm doing and here's what I'm going to do. So we want to hear it all when y'all come back. Please go into your rooms, take some time to introduce yourself to everyone in your space, and then think about this prompt question. How might you use power mapping and or the partnerships table to help you build CHW power? And we will be your timekeepers, so you just focus on having fun and chatting with the people in your group, and we'll tell you when you have some time, then when the time is running out, and we're going to call you back. Okay? Stay with us, have fun, and make some friends. We're going to put you into groups now, but before that, any questions? Who's excited to do this activity? Yeah, I see smiles and stuff. Awesome. Okay,
Yeah.
let's get y'all into those breakouts, okay? See you soon. So thank you all for going into those groups and meeting someone new or getting to catch up with someone you haven't spoken with, perhaps. Let's do some large group share outs. And if you want to keep your cameras on, I encourage it so we can continue to have a face to the name with the people we're talking to. And if you can't, totally understand. Want to ask everybody, what about your question? For people who got to talk about it, or as you're just reflecting now, how might you use power mapping or the partnerships table that we mentioned to help you build CHW power? What are some of the themes that came up in your group? And I want to be clear, something that we do in webinars and other things that we host at Envision is what's learned here leaves here, but what's said here stays here. So we want to respect people, their privacy and things like that in their group. So you can speak to your own program or your own personal experience, but otherwise we can share general highlights and themes. All right.
This is intrinsic to the way CHWs do work, right? This idea that, around how we grow power isn't about doing for, right? And that's so much of this. Everything that we've got here, the tables, the power maps, all those things are so that it's not about doing for, so that we are ensuring that it's about with, and that capacity is growing through this process. So it's not just about that outcome, right? It's about the process that gets us there, that in and of itself grows capacity and power. And so thank you for lifting that up.
Yes. Thank you. I want to read one thing in the chat, and then maybe we can have one or two more folks come off of mute before we head into our closing. Barbara, who I know is from Wisconsin, was sharing that she wanted to say how her group talked about how it can be overwhelming to map partners and power on a statewide basis. And then suggested a couple things that, a few solutions or approaches could be to start small with very focused, specific goals, or with just one county or a community at a time. For instance, instead of saying maybe, the goal for the power map is sustain all Wisconsin CHWs, it could be implement Medicare reimbursement for CHWs in this county. Things like that. And that can help it to sometimes feel less overwhelming. Also, that partnerships table that we showed you all to help who are the priority partners, and thinking about who have the most influence or decision, like that most influence, decision-making influence. And Leslie, I'd love you to speak to that too.
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the things that, I mean, I think it's important to note that none of these things are static, right? They are, you evolve them and they expand and contract. And so you might have like a really expanded one, and then you might start to note that, hey, there's a bunch of partners listed here that all are sort of a constellation of a partnership. And so then you might zoom in on just like the one or two that you have the closest connection to. They're on your map, or the ones that of that partnership have the greatest amount of power, and they're on that map, and maybe it's the same people. And so that way it's not just like everybody under the sun, right? But you're starting to get into who are who's the most strategic folks to be in connection with for that particular goal. And I think that's the important thing, is we're not saying like, don't build relationships with any of these people. It's about, for this goal, build these relationships. For this other goal, build these relationships, right? And so your relationships are expansive depending on the goal that you're in. And yeah, it is true that, I mean, when I've done this, right, oftentimes I'll start with a map that has like so many different people on it. And then I'll be like, oh, gotta revise that goal, right? I think I got too big. Okay, I'm gonna contract the goal. Then my map contracts. Okay, now I see it a little bit clearer, and I'm able to start grouping people. And then I can look at it and say like, okay, and this is the top 10 priority partners. That list, that other table that we had, start to pull that over. Like, these are the top 10. These are the ones that I know absolutely, based on the likelihood of allyship and how much power they have. These are the ones that I'm going to really emphasize. And when I do that, it's pretty likely that there's going to be more people that come out of that. And so then I'm going to pop those people on the map, and I'm going to go have my one-to-ones with them.
Yeah, thanks for speaking to that, Leslie. Just the fact that your power map is going to change again and again and again. You'll start with one. You might have, you might have had like 30 plus power maps, more than that, depending on your goal by the time you're done. You could see just in my presentation that there was like 4 different maps, and that doesn't account for after every conversation I had with people. So that's getting into some of the nitty-gritty details. Reach out to us if you want some more help with, but what would that look like in my community? Or what would that look like with my goal? Okay, maybe hearing from one more person.
I love that you're speaking to, sort of the long term, right? Like the long run, like, oh, okay, we know that we're building on this, right? The idea of like, this is in our back pocket. We can refer back. We can pull that up. We can come back to these relationships again and again, or other things, right? Our successes, our actions, our things that we've developed. All those things don't stay put, right? They come back around, they come up again and again and again. And the more we do that, the more we're building our power. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. I would invite you to continue to put any highlights or thoughts, epiphanies you might have into the chat. We're going to move on since we have to do a wrap up and just have a couple more slides of content. And then we're going to start our live stream in Envision, okay? And in my Envision. So let's hop into the slides. Thank you. And thanks again to everyone who came off of mute or shared in the chat. So we all just reflected together, thinking about how you might use power maps or partnerships table in your work to grow CHW power. And we just wanted to note that once you have that list of your priority partners and you know who you want to build your relationship with, again, power maps are a great place to be able to then have some analysis and to be able to prioritize and strategize where to move next. Because power maps reveal those relationship building priorities and they help you think of those next steps, which is to influence the decision makers, prioritizing something called one-to-ones with the people who have decision-making power, and then coalition building. And I saw someone was putting something in the chat about collaborative power. Yes, that's what we're talking about. Coalition building, prioritizing one-to-ones with people and groups who you want to build collective power with. So you heard me say one-to-ones. And our next slide, we really emphasize building those relationships with one-to-ones. It's one of the most fundamental tools of community organizing, and it's really just a very intentional meeting and conversation between two people with the goal of building the relationship and understanding their motivation to do the work that they do. So their self-interest, bringing it back to what we were talking about before. So you're going to learn about what their story is, how to connect, and how to align interests to build that collective power. And if you go to the next slide, we have a section on this again in the participant guidebook that you can look at. It's pages 19 and 20, and it will help you to be able to identify goals for your one-to-one and prepare for your one-to-one. Also has a space for you to take notes on things that came up out of your one-to-one. So we do encourage you all to utilize that. Okay, passing it back to Leslie.
All right. Thanks, Essie. All right. So we're going to wrap up here. Once again, at the center of the triangle is power, right? The ability to do stuff. And our goal is to grow the power of CHWs. So the ability of CHWs to do stuff, to make change. And when we bring several people together, then you have collective power, right? Folks, we're talking about that power of collaboration. Then you have collective power, or the ability of multiple people to make change happen. And to the right of this definition, it says, nothing about us without us is for us. This comes from disability rights advocacy movement and is central to several movements throughout history, including CHW movement. And it really epitomizes the idea that power is built with CHWs, not for CHWs. Advance the slide, please. So here's an example of what it looks like to build power to implement sustainability approaches. And it's really a partnership and relationship between CHWs and allies, with a strong emphasis on CHWs being the ones to lead. It's essential to emphasize that without CHWs and CHW leadership, sustainability, which is what we're looking to, right? We're looking to sustain. Sustainability can really be compromised. So in some cases, and this is going to sound real familiar to folks, right? Decisions about the workforce have been made without involving CHWs, which can really hinder any effort, but especially sustainability efforts. The APHA CHW section created a policy on CHW self-determination, which states that at least half of any group making decisions about CHWs should be CHWs. So that said, both CHWs and CHW allies play a crucial role in this work. So it's not to say like only CHWs, right? We need that partnership. We need that allyship. So that CHW self-determination policy serves as the base of this pyramid and is a foundational building block of this model, which illustrates principles for partnership between CHWs and allies. With CHW leadership and at least 50% representation of CHWs, CHWs and allies can confidently set collaborative agreements for decision-making processes. And those then can reflect CHW voices and needs. So when addressing critical parameters such as CHW definitions, training standards, and certifications, having CHWs at the table, or better yet, constructing the table ensures that these decisions are made by and for CHWs. And this in turn paves the way for effective implementation of sustainability approaches that are both inclusive and reflective of the workforce. All right, we'll advance the slide. So putting it all together, right? A great resource is the relationship building questions on page 11 to 14 in the guide and reflection journal, which really lays things out here. But putting this all together, CHW leadership, our existing relationships, plus a relationship building strategy based on our partnership table and power maps come together as ingredients into one pot to complete the recipe for growing CHW power. So join us next week for Envision's approach to CHW financial sustainability.
Thank you so much, Leslie. And so that was some amazing information. Thank you all so much for that. And so to wrap up our next webinar, Envision's approach to CHW financial sustainability, a little bit that we touched on today. So if you would like more about that, chime in next week. And that'll be Thursday, April 24th. You can now register, and the times are there, and the link should be in the chat. I just wanted to say thank you all so much for joining us and participating, coming off of mute, going into the breakout rooms, and just sharing all of your thoughts and wonderful information. So thank you again, and I will scoot over to open the other space for more conversation.